The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
We've been observing the free fall of Donald Trump since he decided to shut down the government as this temper tantrum because he didn't get money for his border wall. We've already seen more than one poll confirming that Trump's approval is down, his disapproval is up, Nancy Pelosi's approval keeps going up. But we now have a much more extensive and detailed Quinnipiac poll about these and other issues. And it's even more drastic than we thought, the impact over the last 5-6 weeks of this shutdown. Now, I'm going to give you numbers, and what you have to remember is that the bar is really low for congressional approval. Okay, congressional approval is historically low, period. In general, Congress has a terrible approval rating. Some of the highlights from this Quinnipiac poll. Number one, Democrats in Congress have a 38% approval rating right now. This doesn't sound that high, but it's actually the highest since July of 2009. It's been almost 10 years since Democrats in Congress have had an approval rating so high. Number two, voters who trust Pelosi more than Trump now make up 49% of the American electorate, and 56% now blame Trump and the Republican Party, it should really be and or the Republican Party, for the government shutdown. These are really significant numbers. And to understand, you might look at them and say, everything's kind of like between 40 and 60. Like, is this really that significant? It's significant. On the Democratic side, again, 10 years since there's been 38% approval for Democrats in the House. Half of all Americans trust the Speaker of the House more than President Trump. That's a huge number when you account for how polarized the United States of America currently is. Now, that third number is not actually that great. When I hear that 56% of Americans blame Trump and or the Republican Party for the shutdown, they're right. That is a majority. It's the right answer, but it's also way lower than it should be, because if 56% of Americans believe that either Trump or Republicans are to blame for the shutdown, that leaves 44%. That means 44% of the American public either blames Democrats for the shutdown that, remember, Trump promised ahead of time and then did, or they don't know who's to blame, both of which are problems. And this is why you just can't rely on people switching to the right vote in order to win an election. If after everything that has happened here, Trump famously and furiously ranting in the Oval Office to Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer about how he would be proud to shut it down, you still have some Democrats like Tulsi Gabbard playing the both sides or to blame game when it comes to the shutdown. After all of that we saw, we end up with only 56% of the country confidently saying it was Trump's fault or Republicans' fault that the government shut down. That means we're in trouble for 2020, right? This is what I've been talking about, Pat. Any reasonable person should understand that this is the Trump shutdown. He promised to shut it down. He said he would own it if he did, and then he shut it down. That's it. Like that, there's nothing else to it here. And yet, 44% of the country is either not reasonable or not informed, which is how you get presidents reelected with approvals in the 40s, or mathematically, it can even happen with approvals in the high 20s. We can't count on people realizing what's going on. We need to get new people out there and voting.
I think at the beginning of the government shutdown, the vast majority of people knew that it was the Trump shutdown. But after a little while, just a couple of weeks, I think neutrality bias starts to set in, and people find it noble and sanctimonious to say, well, it's important that both sides come together and find a solution to this. We just have to blame all of Washington for this. And, you know, some people just don't follow politics closely enough. And if they're a federal worker not getting their paycheck, they don't care exactly who to blame. If it's one side or the other, they just want to blame both sides because they need to get paid, and they're going to just try to do whatever they can to make sure that they get that paycheck. I think that's what happens once these things drag on, and we could be facing another one in another couple weeks.
There could be another one February 15th for sure. And this is why, I mean, the call to arms here is, okay, we are getting an inkling that resistance to Trump's antics is good. It's seen favorably. Democrats in the House and Nancy Pelosi specifically have had significant increases to their approval the more that they have resisted Trump when it comes to the State of the Union, the shutdown, border wall funding, everything. Okay, that's a glimmer. That's a glimmer of hope. Most people blame Trump for the shutdown. Okay, that's good. It's a little concerning that it's only 56%. But the most important takeaway from this poll in terms of like, okay, what do we do now in terms of 2020? The most important takeaway is that assuming people understanding the world will lead to Trump losing in 2020 is wrong, okay? Any version of look at X that Trump did, obviously people are going to vote him out in 2020. You've lost. Like, you've conceded the game. That is a losing approach. And that is why I am so over and over and over, I am making clear that approval ratings don't matter. Favorability ratings don't matter. Electability games at this point aren't what's important. Voter turnout, and thus also fighting voter suppression, which is already ramping up for the 2020 election, even though it's barely February of 2019. So my focus is going to be that this is going to be an election, if it's going to be one in 2020, that is going to be one on solidarity from the left, saying the number one goal is Trump out, okay? And the understanding that it doesn't matter what state you're in. It doesn't matter how much you think your vote will make a difference. It doesn't matter anything else other than you need to vote and you need to work to get other people to vote, because it is going to be determined by turnout, period. I'm on Twitter at dpacman. The show is on Twitter at David Pakman Show. We have a great program for you today. I will be answering audience questions. We will be hearing from the audience during live calls as well. And on the bonus show, by the way, we will be hearing about Pat's upcoming vacation, which I know is very, very exciting to Pat. And we'll see what the audience thinks of it as well.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new member of the day is Lori Heller. Lori, thank you for being a subscriber to the show. Thanks for supporting the work that we do with a few dollars, or I guess as we call them, pennies per day, because that's all it costs. Also want to say thanks to Jennifer Valentino, longtime David Pakman Show member, been with us almost 5 years. I implore you to join Lori and Jennifer by signing up at www.joinpakman.com. If you would like a discount off of a membership, get on our mailing list at davidpakman.com, because Saturday is my birthday, and we are going to be sending out just a massive, massive membership discount code, which if you've been waiting around for an opportunity to get a really cheap membership, I highly recommend it. Okay, let's go to the phones at 617-830-4750. Let's go first to our caller from the 352 area code. Caller from 352, who's there?
Hello, David. This is Reese from Central Florida.
Hey, Reese, what's going on?
I saw you recently posted a poll about Howard Schultz and how he could affect the 2020 election.
Yes.
Like because apparently he's running as a centrist independent, which that seems like totally absurd. I'm not convinced he's going to have any impact. I don't see anyone taking him seriously besides maybe like a few rich people or maybe some famous celebrities. Like, does he have any appeal to anyone?
No, I think you're right. I mean, I think that, so here's I think the most likely scenario, if we imagine like a bell curve, I think it's a single-tailed curve. I think the most likely scenario is that he just has like the thick of the curve is he has no impact whatsoever. and that if he were to have an impact, it would be one that is helping Donald Trump in the end. So I totally agree with you. I would love to get an answer from him about why Starbucks coffee is so terrible, although I think I know the answer to that. But beyond that, I'm not even remotely curious.
Yeah, I don't. He recently said on Twitter that he thinks Medicare for all is un-American, and like, do you really think you're going to get any votes to like?
Well, it is in the sense that in the U.S. we have a completely immoral and perverted system of healthcare. In that sense, it's not an American system right now, other than the fact that Medicare is American. So that kind of makes it a weird thing to say, you know.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, David. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the call, Reese. Thanks very much. Let's see. Let's go to our next caller from the 818 area code. Caller from 818. Who's there? 818. Maybe you have us muted or something?
Hey, good morning.
Yes.
Hey, David, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hey, so for the 2020 election, I was just wondering on your views on Bernie Sanders and whether it would be a correct choice for the presidency, or what direction we should maybe look towards?
Well, Bernie has not announced his candidacy right now, although there are a number of articles saying that he's imminently going to announce. So I guess, you know, if you're asking me, do I agree with Bernie on policy? Yeah, he's one of the people closest to me when it comes to policy for sure. But I'm not sure if that's really what you mean. Like, are you asking sort of a different question?
Yeah. No, that's something. But like, do you think he's strong enough to beat Trump? Because Trump's base is right now very divided and strong, and you know, us that are on the other side of the coin, most of our thoughts are kind of scattered. And with David, the guy, the CEO from Starbucks,
Howard Schultz,
that has the possibility. Yeah, that has the possibility to definitely shift the, I guess, the Democratic Party and the Independent Party in favor of the Republicans.
Listen, I get that we have to ask the question, can X person beat Trump? I just think it's way too early to be playing that game, because that's how we end up with bad decisions. And I think you're smart to point out, you said that the Trump base is divided and strong, but I think you mean united and strong, right?
Yeah. United and strong.
Because they are united and strong, and half the country doesn't vote, I don't actually think that this is going to come down to picking a Democrat that can pick off some Trump voters. I think this is merely about picking a Democrat who allows the enthusiasm for removing Donald Trump to sort of run through them. They need to be a conduit for people's desire to remove Donald Trump, which simply allows the left to go and get people who weren't planning to vote. We're going to win on voter turnout. We're not going to win if it depends on convincing Trumpists to vote for Bernie or Elizabeth Warren or whoever else. So I would not even think about it in those terms. I
see. All right, David. Well, thank you very much, man. I appreciate you taking my call.
Thank you so much. Great to hear from you. Let's see. Let's go next to the 417 area code. Caller from 417. Who's there?
Hi, David. This is Dion from Southwest Missouri.
Hey, Dion. What's going on?
I've been paying attention to this 2020 lead up, and it seems like the Democratic Party has a favorite. It's Kamala Harris. I don't know if you agree with that or not. But
why do you think that? Well, let's explore it. Why do you think that?
Well, she got a town hall on CNN.
But did the DNC arrange that, or was that something CNN pushed for? I mean, I was wondering the same thing, but I mean, maybe other candidates have also been offered town halls. I don't know.
You know, that is a possibility. And if it's not the DNC and it is just CNN, there is some sort of contingent that does obviously back her. I
agree. But as far as the town hall, I think that if the DNC went to CNN and said, hey, I know we have 8 people running, but we just want you to do a Kamala Harris town hall and no others. Some part of me feels like after what happened in 2016, it would have leaked that the DNC has already sort of like crowned her. So I don't know. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying I don't know that the town hall is the evidence for it.
Sure. But that's actually not my question. My question is, if she is the front runner, and she does get pushed forward, and she does have the momentum. Is she a wolf in sheep's clothing? I don't know if I believe any of the things she says based on her record as a prosecutor who has some questionable practices in the past.
I have brought this up. I've brought this up. I also am unsure when it comes to the criminal justice record, and when it comes to, I knew this was going to happen, and it's starting to happen. The Medicare for All thing. I don't know if you've been following any of the stuff we've been saying about this issue, Dion, but I've been saying that Medicare for All is sort of becoming a litmus test for Democrats for 2020, but it's becoming a litmus test in name only, where you are going to see, I would guess, just about every candidate say, oh, yeah, I believe Medicare for All or something like it is what we should get to, but then kind of back off of it and say, but here's some ways we can just tweak the system we have, sort of thing. She's already starting to do that, and that is definitely another concern to me.
Absolutely. I appreciate you taking the call. That's all I really had to ask about.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Dion, great to hear from you. Appreciate you calling in. Let's go to, I don't know, let's try the 419 area code. Caller from 419. Who's this?
Hello, David.
Yes.
Hi, my name's Obed. I'm a huge fan of your...
Sorry, what did you say your name was?
Obed.
All right, go ahead.
Okay. I had a question in terms, recently in Twitter. You know Charlie Kirk?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, he threw out his back and had some blood clot issue, and then he was taken to the hospital. But then his friend Kyle Kashav, I think, blamed the whole thing, blamed the lack of hospital beds on the California's stance, I guess, on California's healthcare system. So the people are making jokes like, oh, living like capitalists every single day. So what's your take on that? Exactly.
So I'm not at all aware of this. I met Kyle Kashuv. He came up and introduced himself to me at Politicon in October in Los Angeles. And I mean, he was a perfectly nice kid to me, although I'm aware that his political views are pretty outrageous. I don't know, having not seen the tweets at all, it's very hard for me to really comment. But the truth is that whatever particular gripe you have with the California healthcare system, it's all part of the broader for-profit healthcare system that exists. Like any public options, any public hospitals, any subsidization of the system, it all exists within the disastrous, bigger picture for-profit healthcare system that we have. So I think it's disingenuous and also totally misdirected to say that anything good in the system is because it's a for-profit system and anything bad is because of the elements in it that try to provide services to everybody. That's just nonsense.
Okay. And I have a quick question also, if you have time.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's also another thing I saw on Twitter where it was remember that whole, where Prager University had videos of the whole Christian baker thing where if you find another baker thing. Well, then also recently Prager University tried putting their ads on Spotify, and then Spotify banned their ads. And so now they're trying to put a lawsuit on Spotify and claiming that they're biased against conservatives.
Yeah, I saw that. I'm actually in a back and forth with PragerU. The Twitter account has been following me for a long time, and I got into a back and forth with them about this, and I pointed out that there's a hypocrisy here, and they said, no, it's not hypocrisy because this isn't about, they tried to draw a distinction somehow, and it was so dumb that I don't even remember it. But then people piled on and said, no, you guys really are hypocrites here.
Right, because it just doesn't make any sense that when it comes to their policies and beliefs, if that's being ignored, that it's because free speech is being censored when it's just a private company.
I'm remembering. I think their argument was, we're not looking for the government to fix this. We just want to tell people Spotify's doing this so that people will stop using it. And it's like, no, you're pretty damn litigious. They've previously sued YouTube and Google, and they're doing the exact same thing. It's pathetic.
Yeah. Well,
all right, thanks for the call. I appreciate it. Yeah, great to hear from you. Let's check in with Patrick from Indiana. Patrick, what's going on, buddy?
Hey, how you doing?
Good.
So sorry about that Jimmy Dore call a while back. I know you lost some members because of that. That was my last call. So
sorry, hold on a second. We've got your volume at the max, and I can still barely hear you. You said something about a Jimmy Dore call?
No, I just wanted to apologize for my Jimmy Dore call and you losing some members over that a while back. I know that was a point of contention for some of your listeners, and I just wanted to say sorry. But that's not my.
Oh, no problem.
Question.
You'll be getting an invoice from us soon. Go ahead.
My question actually pertains to everyone's man of the hour, Howard Schultz, and I just kind of wanted to get your take on why the media and the press give such deference to billionaires, especially when they try to enter the political arena. Like Howard Schultz immediately has all this legitimacy and gets to go on any show he wants. And there was actually a segment on Stephanie Ruhle's show where Jeff Stein called into question his presidential run and said that he was probably doing it for self-serving interests because of Ocasio-Cortez's proposed marginal tax rate on him. So I just wanted to get your take on why you think the media has so much deference to billionaires who decide to become politicians.
We live in a country where wealth is equivalent with being good and being smart, essentially, right? And I know people will say, David, that's not true. Look at all these commies who say billionaires are evil. There's almost no communist in the United States. They have no significant voice whatsoever. And questioning inequality also is not an indication that you think the rich people are necessarily bad people. That exists. But big picture, the media and political apparatus in this country value money as a proxy to figuring out whether someone is intelligent, skilled, or a good person. So that's like the one sentence answer. Now, getting beyond that, there is this bias towards sensationalism and the idea of Schultz as not just another Democratic candidate. He's not Kirsten Gillibrand, for example. He is doing something different. He's saying, I would be running as an independent. And of course, implicit in that is the way in which he could end up helping Donald Trump. There is sort of like logophilia in the sense of corporate logos like Starbucks and people who effectively are praying at the altar of Starbucks. He is the founder of that, is also in a sort of revered and privileged position. So it's all that stuff. I mean, it's corporatocracy and it's capitalism, and that's why.
And one more quick follow-up, if I may.
Yeah.
He was on Morning Joe, and I believe Mika Brzezinski asked him how much a box of Cheerios cost. I believe this was this morning, and he had no idea.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if he'll ever get any backlash for something that is frankly idiotic, for not even having a ballpark estimate of how much a box of Cheerios costs.
Well, you know, it's funny you mentioned that. Let's talk about that for a second. That's interesting. So there's a segment you can find on YouTube, and I encourage people to check it out, where Ellen DeGeneres has Bill Gates on her show, and she plays a game with him where he just has to guess how much things cost, and it's like a box of frozen pizza treats and some Tide pods for washing clothes or whatever. And he has no idea. And I get the game, right? It's like he's so out of touch. I've heard Howard Stern be asked by Robin Quivers, do you have any idea what a gallon of milk costs right now? And the guy has no idea. I think that it should be concerning to us in the sense that we don't want people who are in positions of power that are completely out of touch. But that alone, I mean, listen, I'd rather have Bill Gates than Howard Schultz, I think, as president of the United States. Why? Because I think Bill Gates's areas of expertise and the intelligence that he's developed, the knowledge he's developed as just an intelligent guy in the world would make him a better president on policy than Howard Schultz. I get the game, but I don't know how. I mean, you know, yeah, the guy's out of touch. We know that.
Well, that's pretty much what I wanted to ask you. So thanks for taking my call.
All right. Really appreciate it, Patrick. Good to hear from you. We're going to take a quick break. If you're on hold, don't hang up because we are taking more calls after the break. I just have to sneak in a quick break, and we will be right back and back to the phone. Stand by.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Let's go back to the phones. A lot of people who want to check in with me today at 617-830-4750. Let's go to our caller from the 234 area code. Caller from 234. Definitely make sure we're off speakerphone. And who's there?
Yep. I didn't know the break would be so short. Anyway, my name's Adam. I'm from Ohio, and I just have a pretty unrelated question. But my question is, I didn't know you were a drummer. What do you enjoy about drumming? How often do you practice? Have you ever been in a band or released anything?
I've never, let's see, have I released stuff? I guess I have. I've been in a couple bands, and we played shows. So I was in one band in Western Massachusetts. I was in another band in Brooklyn when I lived there. I have not found a band in Boston yet. I tried out with one band, wasn't really a good fit. You know, it's not that I don't have enough to do, but I just have not found a band to play with here in Boston. But I would love to do that. What do I love about drumming? I don't know. It's just, it's both fun and interesting mentally, and the coordination of four limbs, I feel like connects areas of my brain in ways that other stuff doesn't. Yeah, I don't know. I've just enjoyed it for the 15 years I've played.
Okay, cool. Just because I'm also a drummer, so it was cool to find out that we also share that.
All right. Who are some of your favorite drummers?
Yeah. That's a good question. I don't know. I like a lot of, just for the technicality of it, like a lot of the progressive metal drummers, but also there are some really excellent math rock drummers, like Damon Che. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it. And Zach Hill is also, he's in the band Hella, and right now he's in Death Grips. He's pretty crazy too, but yeah.
Oh man, I think the only overlap with that I have is I used to like Dream Theater when Mike Portnoy was the drummer, but beyond that,
yeah, exactly. I think he's a great drummer. He's very talented at what he does.
Yeah, but what about like Steve Gadd and Vinnie Colaiuta and those guys?
I have nothing but respect for sure. I mean,
good.
I can only do so much myself, so I mean, I always look up to people who are able to move as quickly and with such dexterity as they. For
All
sure.
right, if you were to badmouth Steve Gadd, we would have to put you in our call system as never pick up on again, but we're not going to do that.
Okay.
All right, thanks for the call. Sure. Appreciate it. Yep, thanks for checking in. Always good to hear from other drummers. Let's go to the 714 area code. Caller from 714. Who's there?
Hey, it's Laura from Los Angeles.
Hey, Laura, what's going on?
Hey, I was wondering if you had an opinion on the Atlantic article about Bryan Singer that came out, basically that he has been allegedly abusing boys for 20-something years in Hollywood, and somehow the Me Too movement hasn't really effectively shut him down. So I was wondering if you follow that or if you have any opinions on that.
I didn't see that article. Is that new?
Yeah, like it really just came out within the past week.
Oh, okay. And so the claim is that, so we're talking about Bryan Singer, we're talking about the director, writer?
Director, X-Men and Bohemian Rhapsody.
Got it. And the claim is that he was sexually abusing males under age 18?
Yeah, young boys. Like they're saying he has been doing this for a while and he's been getting away with it. And so some of the accusers have come out and they're saying one of the young actors, Brad Renfro, who passed away from, I think, drug addiction, that he was actually one of the victims, and that's what led to his drug addiction.
Wow. Well, listen, I'm taking your word that this is what the article says, but I really don't know anything about it. All I can say is what I say at the beginning of all of these fiascos, which is if there are people claiming that they were victimized by an individual, particularly when they are numerous, we have to take that seriously. It needs to be investigated, and it should have consequences if indeed it's true. But I've just not seen that particular article. Now, let me ask you this, Laura: does the article make a case for why he hasn't suffered consequences?
They're saying he kind of deflects it by saying it's homophobia. So it's the oldest trick in the book to say, oh, okay, he's a powerful gay producer, director. Oh, he must be abusing boys. So
right, but that wouldn't explain why there are specific accusers, right?
What do you mean?
In other words, that might be something you can say if the allegations are just sort of general, like this guy's a pedophile type of thing. But if specific accusers have come forward, then that doesn't seem like a good defense.
Yeah, I guess it's just he's so powerful, and maybe the Me Too movement prioritized stories about women, and so the males who said that they were abused were not prioritized quite as much.
I understand. Yeah, that that element I've heard and read before, and that wouldn't be new. I'll check into it, Laura. What's the weather like in LA? Is it great?
Well, it's overcast right now.
Oh, what a tragedy. Unbelievable. You're telling me it's cloudy and 65?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is right now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I feel really, really sorry for you, and hopefully tomorrow the weather is better.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
All right. Appreciate the call. Thanks so much for calling in. Let's go to our caller from the 412 area code. 412, I think, is sometimes Pittsburgh. Always want to hear from, the not Rust Belt, but more, well, what is Pittsburgh? I guess it's somewhat of a more industrial city. Maybe the caller's not even from Pittsburgh. I don't know. Who's there?
This is Otis from Pittsburgh.
Okay, Otis, what's going on?
And actually, Pittsburgh is known more now for health and technology. They
Okay,
really
I apologize.
reformed the city here. Oh, that's all right. That's all right. I mean, it's common, and I mean, it was that way forever, so it's understandable. Education as well, I should add.
And it's known for the Pittsburgh left as well.
Exactly.
Yep.
Well, which technically people do everywhere, but
right.
Pittsburgh likes to own
So I'm
that.
completely
But
off on all of these things. All right, what's going on, Otis?
No, not at all. And I want to apologize because you may have covered this, and I've missed it. But
apology accepted.
I wanted to talk. I wanted to talk about the Matthew Whitaker opinion / announcement about the Mueller investigation should be wrapping up quickly.
Yeah.
I work from home, so I was watching that live as it took place, and my immediate opinion, and I think you'll agree with this, but my immediate opinion and reaction to that was he was clearly trying to set an expectation for Trumpers that if this thing isn't wrapping up soon, that there's some type of malfeasance or digging or delaying or dragging going on that they should be upset about, and they should start demanding for this investigation to come to an end when Stone was just indicted. So
yeah. No, you're spot on. I did cover this earlier in the week, and my view is basically that, number one, the speech was bizarre. He was all sweaty. Maybe he has a condition that makes him sweat, but it seemed like it was like flop sweat to me. He was stuttering.
Albert Brooks, Network News.
And looked confused. And I mean, there haven't been leaks from Mueller. It's really hard for me to imagine that Mueller would sit down with Whitaker, particularly given that Whitaker has publicly said that if given the chance, he would try to obstruct such an investigation and say, hey, Matthew, you know what? We're almost done. And that then Whitaker goes out and says that. And in particular, a pre-dawn raid of Roger Stone's house a week ago so that he doesn't destroy evidence. That wouldn't normally be the thing you would do if that's going to be like the last indictment or the last person that might be getting indicted. It all stinks to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad we're in agreement. I thought you would be as well.
All right. Thanks for the call. Really appreciate it. Good to hear from you. Okay, let's go next to our caller from the 832 area code. Caller from 832. Who's there?
Yeah, my name is Brian. I'm from Houston, and I really love your show. Just wanted to let you know.
Thank you.
Also, my question is, given what we know about the 2016 primaries where the Clinton Foundation and the DNC, there was a lot of corruption going on behind the scenes. Essentially, the Clinton Foundation was, had the DNC, the DNC was basically, sorry to be confusing, the DNC was basically an arm of the Clinton Foundation. Given what we know...
Well, what do you mean by that? What do you mean?
That...
So I agree with you that the DNC basically pre-selected and supported Hillary Clinton, but what do you mean that DNC was an arm of the Clinton Foundation?
Well, basically, Kyle did a segment over this, over on Secular Talk, and basically, during the 2012 election, the DNC used up all his funds and was in debt. So there was a backroom deal with W. Wasserman Schultz and the Clinton Foundation where the Clinton Foundation essentially bailed them out in return for some privileges. And that's what I mean by essentially it was an arm of the Clinton Foundation.
Okay. I'm not aware of that, but that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, you should definitely look at it. Kyle did a segment over it. Basically, my question is, how do we know that the 2020 primaries won't have a similar outcome, given that Hillary's rerun is still up in the air?
We don't.
According to recent reports.
We don't. I mean, whether or not Hillary Clinton runs won't even change it. No matter what, the DNC may once again have its finger on the scales, even if they are more heavily restricted from acting in a more public manner to support a candidate. It's very possible that in more private ways, they would support a candidate. So I share your concern. I'm extremely concerned about what role the DNC is going to have in the 2020 primary. There have been some changes made in terms of the superdelegate stuff, and a few other things have changed, which should improve the circumstances somewhat. But I absolutely share your concern.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much my only question, because the president, the 2020 election is just around the corner, and I know that there's going to be a lot of pushback with the DNC and progressives. And
yeah, I mean, the way that the remedy for this, like with everything else, is everybody has to vote, right? So the DNC putting its finger on the scales matters more the fewer people vote. The more people vote, the influence of the DNC to override the will of the people is diminished. So when it comes to getting Trump out, it's voter turnout. When it comes to having voters actually be fully in control of who the nominee is, it comes to people voting. That's the solution. That's what everybody's got to vote.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
All right. Thank you for the call.
Yeah.
Great to hear from you. Appreciate it. Let's see. Let's go to our caller from the 914 area code. Caller from 914. Who's there?
Hi, Dave. I love your show.
Thank you.
I
Who's
watch
this?
it all the time. Only my name's Rory. I'm a girl, not a boy.
Did you say Rory?
Yeah, with an R.
Oh, all right. What's going on, Rory?
Yeah. So I'm just curious. I'm originally from New York, but I live in Florida now, and I have to be honest with you. Even
Please.
as like a white female, I had trouble voting.
What does that
this
mean?
Time. I went to the poll, like I went to a polling center where I thought I was allowed, was not allowed, had to like leave.
Okay, but
and
hold on.
go
Let's
other
step through it. Let's step through it. So, why did you go to that polling center as opposed to any other?
That's where I voted the last time in 2016.
Perfect. So you had voted there previously, and you hadn't moved since, so you figured, I'm sure I'm voting in the same place.
Right.
Got it. Okay. You show up, and when
right.
you say you weren't allowed, what did they say?
Well, it wasn't early voting. I was supposed to be early voting. So, like, when I went there the original time, I was early voting.
So it's not actually, so usually for people who don't know this, when people are early voting, sometimes a city that might have 50 places where people vote, there might only be 8 that do early voting, and you can go to them no matter where in the city you live. But then on election day, you have to go to your polling place.
Correct. Yes. So, fine, I did. But on my way in, when I was waiting online, everyone was telling me, no, it's fine. As long as you have ID, it's okay to vote here. Why is there so much, like, disconnect between, like, people, like, voting and not voting? Like, I just...
Rory, I mean, it sounds like here, it sounds like, listen, with total peace and love, it sounds like
the
you didn't, hold on a second, though. It sounds like you didn't immediately realize that early voting can happen at any location, but you have to go to your polling place on election day. And it seems like the people in line just gave you wrong information, right? I mean, is it fair to say that if you just went to your designated polling place on election day, you would have been able to vote?
I mean, it would have been, and I did.
Oh, okay.
Afterward.
Got it.
But what I'm saying is the information that I was getting, like the whole, like it's like, it seems like very like great, like I heard it through the grapevine kind of stuff going on.
People in line were saying, I heard you can vote here no matter where you live in the city.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, that's people being uninformed.
Yeah.
That's not anything new. That, I mean, we should, your first mistake was listening to those people in line, I think.
Well, I mean, like, I only listened to them for 3 seconds.
Yeah.
But anyway, I just, like, I don't know. The disconnect between the information that we're getting and, like, the information that's real, it's a little troubling.
Yeah, but you didn't get any faulty information from any voting authority, right?
No.
You
not
just
at
went to
all.
the wrong
Just
place, and then
of
people in
mine.
line told you to stay there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just like,
Okay.
I don't know. Facebook, man.
Facebook's a problem. All right, Rory, thank you for the call. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right, take care. And on that note, we're out of time for calls. Thanks to everybody who called. Thanks to everybody that I unfortunately didn't get to. Possible live stream later today, though, could be an opportunity to call in again. We will take calls again.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Okay, let's get into audience questions for the week. First question today. Hey, David, could the United States ever actually become a truly socialist or communist country? This is a hard question to even dig into because it depends on what you mean with those terms. Okay, so first of all, there aren't really 100% unanimously agreed upon definitions of those systems, but we can sort of think about it in the following way. Socialism is a system where workers own the means of production, so you don't have private ownership of businesses. And in many cases, you don't have private ownership of property, although sometimes you can have the private property, but you don't have the private businesses where all employees own the businesses, but individuals can still own private property. You have other situations where the government owns all the companies, but that sometimes is called communism. If it's still a profit-driven market economy, but the government owns all the companies, that's not really communism. That's more actually state capitalism. Then you get to when the government owns the means of production in a non-free market economy. Private property is often also eliminated altogether. That's the closest to the style of the Marxist-Leninist or Stalinist-Leninist ideal. And that is sort of like a working definition of what communism might be. But the key question here is, could this happen in the United States? I believe that full-on socialism and full-on capitalism are not going to happen in the United States, if ever, for a very, very long time. And the reason I say that is right now, first of all, the United States is not a fully capitalist country to begin with, right? The U.S. has never been a totally capitalist system to begin with, a real laissez-faire system, as it would be called. Government has been intertwined with the economy, subsidies, taxes, education, Medicare, the Postal Service, contracts for private companies from the government. There's this endless list where this has never actually been a true laissez-faire, totally capitalist market-driven system. And in that same sense, the idea that we would ever fully become a socialist or communist nation is unlikely from a merely structural perspective, because most countries in the world are not uniquely just one system. They're sort of blends in some ways. The other reason why, at least any time in the near future, total socialism or total communism isn't likely in the United States is that there's no major socialist or communist party in the United States. Yes, over the last 10 years, we've seen the word socialism have fewer and fewer negative connotations compared to where it was coming out of the Cold War, for example. But the most far-left Democrats are basically social democrats. There's a handful of actual democratic socialists. Many call themselves democratic socialists without actually being socialists. So there's not even a significant clamoring for socialism in the United States. If you believe Marxist theory, then you could conceive of the idea that there will eventually be a sort of uprising of the proletariat against the bourgeoisie, and that you will have a Marxist upending of our system. But short of believing that Marx will be fulfilled to the letter at some point in the future, we are more than likely going to continue indefinitely having a mixed system, a system that has elements of capitalism and social democracy, and even maybe some elements of democratic socialism. But to truly get to one of those systems, you would need, one, a real desire for that, or if the idea is a dictator will appear from above and impose that, you would need to first eliminate a lot of the sort of constitutional and democratic safeguards that exist, which would allow such a system to come to power. So I don't see it. As I've said before, I believe that the best systems are mixed. Full-fledged capitalism is a disaster. Stalinist Leninism is a disaster. Authoritarian police states are bad. I believe that very well-regulated capitalism with a significant floor so that people don't fall below, and significant spending on socially democratic programs is the way forward. Sort of related to the last question, but not really. Hey, David, do you think Donald Trump's going to invade Venezuela? So there's a couple backstories on this. One is that we learned that at a certain point earlier in Trump's presidency, I believe in 2017, he was asking aides about what would a plan to invade Venezuela look like. So the idea has certainly been in his head. This has been reinvigorated by the chaos that's currently taking place in Venezuela, where the, quote, re-elected president, Nicolas Maduro, in what appears to have been a completely fraudulent election, has been called into question by the head of the National Assembly, Guaido, who is trying to be interim president until there can be fair elections. So in the midst of this, Donald Trump has come out and said he supports the interim president. And now the question once again is, well, would there be any interest in Donald Trump, by Donald Trump, in invading Venezuela? At any point, I do think that Trump might look for someone to invade to take attention away from his crimes and his failure as president. So at sort of the macro level, it's pretty reasonable, based on what we know about Trump, to consider whether he might try such military action. I think that most of Trump's inner circle knows that it would be a disaster to get involved in Venezuela. I believe that they would do everything possible to prevent another one of these disastrous American military involvements in Latin America, which have been train wrecks for decades. But I do believe there is a chance Donald Trump will push, if he gets desperate enough, to take military action in Venezuela, because he might imagine that it would unite the U.S., that Americans would be sort of overwhelmingly behind getting Maduro fully out in Venezuela. And of course, the problem with invading Venezuela versus a place like Iraq, aside from all of the legal questions as to whether it would be legal to take such action, is that Americans simply don't see Venezuela as a threat to the United States. I'm as against Nicolas Maduro as really as anyone could be. I'm not an authoritarian extremist. I want democracy and voting and free press and free courts. So I'm a huge opponent of Nicolas Maduro. But Venezuela is not even ostensibly a threat to the United States in any traditional sense. I was against military action in Iraq, but there was at least a case that could be made that it was imperative to American national security to go into Iraq. I think it was a case, we know now it was a case based on trumped up and faulty intelligence, but you could at least convince some Americans with that. I don't even know how you convince Americans that it makes sense to send troops to Venezuela for national security reasons. So I think that, yes, Trump might do it, but I don't believe that it will ultimately be useful politically to him. And there are a whole bunch of other things that Trump might do that would be equally crazy and meant to distract from the disaster after disaster that is Trump's presidency. If you disagree with me on this one, let me know. I want to hear from you. Last question today. Hey, David, will a more crowded Democratic primary help the more progressive candidates in that primary, like Elizabeth Warren and potentially Bernie Sanders? So there's a couple ways to approach this. Primary voters are often more politically diverse than general election voters. But right now, the circumstances are those of very significant overlap between candidates. A lot of the candidate ranking sites aren't even on the same page as to who is the most left or center in the Democratic primary. One example of that is that the I Side With is a website that has a pretty good quiz that it asks you about your politics, and then it tells you who are you closest to. It labels Kirsten Gillibrand as more of a socialist, for example, which I just don't think is accurate. I don't know of any way that we would defend Kirsten Gillibrand's politics as socialistic in any way. So, number one, you have circumstances where you have a ton of overlap between candidates. What is the real difference in policy between Gillibrand and Julian Castro, for example? Are they really big differences, or are they relatively minor? Elizabeth Warren and Bernie, for example, if he were to run, are there... How significant are the differences there? I spoke about that on the Monday show with Benjamin Studebaker, and there are differences, and excuse me, as I punch my mic, their approaches are different, but they end up pretty similar on policy. So I am not saying this to suggest that in the end, we should just go with the person who can build the biggest coalition, because those are exactly the types of electability games that I want to avoid playing. But what I am saying is it's not clear to me that more candidates, particularly when they overlap so much, will be in any significant way better for the more progressive candidates. I do think that the more progressive candidates will be held back to some degree if they are from the Northeast of the United States. And again, I'm starting to sort of get into these electability games, but that is going to be more of a liability than being more to the left, because the elected officials in the Democratic Party are pretty significantly to the right of where Democratic voters are on issues related to economic equality, healthcare, the minimum wage, on so many different issues. The electorate is already to the left of Democratic elected officials. So I think that the smear possibilities as being out of touch Northeastern liberals, if those happen to be the more progressive candidates, and I think you understand what I'm sort of getting at, is going to be the biggest liability. But I'm answering the question. I'm trying to avoid playing these electability games. Overall, when the field is more and more crowded, merely mathematically, particularly when a lot of the candidates are similar, it just splits the vote more ways, right? I mentioned Castro and Gillibrand. Warren and Bernie is another possibility, although ideologically they come from different backgrounds. So the vote splitting potential is one that can be very difficult to predict who it will actually help in the net. And only time will tell at this point. But to answer the question, I don't think that tons of candidates benefits the more progressive 2020 Democratic candidates. Send me your thoughts. We've got a great bonus show for you today. We're going to talk about very, very exciting and interesting stories, although I'm out of time to tell you what they are. Become a member at www.joinpacman.com. Become a patron at patreon.com/David Pakman Show to get instant access to the world famous bonus show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.